Cool. A little bit about Action Funder before we jump into the workshop. So for those of you who do not know, Action Funder is a funding platform that we launched in May 2021. And so far, over £413,000 has been distributed or is about to be. So businesses and foundations join the platform and they launch funding pots in locations that they want to support with specific focus area, going from climate change to mental health and well-being to food action. Community groups and charities join Action Funder and upload the projects that they need funding for. So for example, if you're a community center, this could be purchasing new benches for your community garden or support running sessions for children on a Tuesday night. Your projects are then matched with relevant funds of the platform. And so one application can be submitted to several funders, increasing your chances of funding, but you only have to do the work once. It's free to use for community groups, and all you have to do is sign up, post your project, and then wait for the updates. And if you're not funded the first time, your project will remain live and will be matched with other funds. Right, it's really nice to see many of you here today. Let me have a look. We have Bev Wakelam from Future Proof Health. Nice to see you. Charlotte from Mac in Manchester. Hannah from Whole Food Partnership. Rooted in Whole. Nice to see you all. And as I was saying earlier, in the room is Corinna Hartwig, the brilliant funding doctor who will deliver today's workshop. Corinna has helped many community organizations, charities, and social enterprises find funding, and she's worked extensively across the world of fundraising for the likes of the Big Lottery Fund, the EU Rural Development Funding Programme, and she's delivered plenty of popular workshops for urban communities, the voluntary sector training, and of course, Action Funder. And perhaps most important of all, she has personal experience of community projects and setting up small enterprises. And on that note, I will hand over to you now, Corinna.
Thank you very much, Perrine. Thank you for the introductions, and hello to everyone, and thank you for joining us at this lovely sunny lunchtime in East Hertfordshire. To kick off, we have prepared a little poll, Perrine. Would you mind just launching it? And I'm going to share my screen in the meantime. If you wouldn't mind perhaps telling us, please share with us as anonymous, but who knows how much money they actually need right now, today, this lunchtime. So you can take, I have no idea at all. That's absolutely fine. I have a bit of an idea, or I know exactly how much I need. So if you could just give us an idea, that would be brilliant right now. I will give you just a few minutes.
I think we're waiting for a couple people
more, and then it might be a good idea just to share the result, Perrine, so that we have an idea. Brilliant. So I have no idea, 23%. Most of you have a bit of an idea, and we have a few experts in the room. That's brilliant as well, and I would invite you to assist myself and maybe Perrine today if you're experts, but if you kind of new to budgeting and you have a bit of an idea, then hopefully we will be able to give you a few tips today. So hello again, I am Corinna, also known as the Funding Doctor, and I'm just going to show you my little beautiful coat that I've put on for you today. And today we will talk about budgeting and how to show your budget in your Action Funder application. So we're going straight into the subject now, if that's okay with you all. I hope. Okay, when funders are giving money to community groups, finding out what difference their money is going to make is a top priority. That is why on Action Funder, the question of how funding will be spent is coming up in the second question of your project pitch. And as one of the last steps of your project pitch, there is the budget breakdown, listing the items that will be needed and their costs. So today we're going to talk about simple and realistic budgeting tips that will allow you to secure, hopefully, some funding on Action Funder. And along the way, I will share with you what I have learned on the subject of budgets as a volunteer, but also as a professional in working in grant making. And because if I pulled off a successful community project and learned a lot along the way around budgeting, I am sure you can do too. And I really want to make it easy for you today. So first, let's bust a bit of a myth. Good budgeting is not about being strong in maths. It's really about being able to plan well and about taking time to think a project through. I hope you're pleased and relieved to hear that. So relax for now, and no calculator required yet. And let's take a look at the 5 main elements of budgeting that have helped me in the past. The first element is planning for success. We'll establish why you should have a vision and a goal first, so that you can plan for the success of your project. The next element, in choosing the right tools, we'll look at which tools will help you and your team to budget. Then, under researching your costs, we will dive deeper into how to research and work out your project costs in detail before applying the special Funding Doctor 3B rule and finalizing your budget. A good budget shows the funder that you can be trusted to put your plan into action and realize your goal, and that you will be spending the money wisely. And at the end of the day, your budget needs to convince the funder just as much as your passion for change and your story do. So let's look and get started with my favorite bit, the planning for success. In order to plan for success, think first about what success will look like for you and your project. Make sure that this vision is ambitious and that all involved in the project can clearly see what the amazing result will be. For today, if it's okay with you, I would like us to use the example of a food growing project. And here is a clear vision of it, a green oasis where community can come together to grow plants and food and take a break and come out of isolation to come together and enjoy the natural environment. Once you have defined that vision, it is important to write down your goal. Because if you have a written goal, it's so much easier to share with others and to commit to it. Here is one example of how you can do this, just by simply writing it on a board. That way you are telling the neighborhood that a new project about positive change is starting up. It's clear for all to see that it is a growing project about plants and vegetables that wants to improve the local area and will eventually grow from this uninspiring communal space into the amazing green oasis that will bring the community together. I would recommend that you start with something small and achievable first. In our example, perhaps start with growing some plants in a small area. And you could also think about starting small in terms of the pilot project, maybe. So great. Now it's time to think about a plan that will help you to pull off your first activity, which is a stepping stone in achieving your ambitious idea. Now I need a little bit of your help, please. What other elements will you need to consider when putting a plan for growing some plants together? Can you maybe share a few in the chat of things that you might need, and try not to think too detailed at this stage. So I invite you to come in and share a few things in the chat. So what elements would you need so that your plan can come together, that you can start pulling off an activity around growing some plants? Water, seeds, compost, staff and volunteers. Yeah, seeds. Yeah. Any more ideas? Refreshments. Okay, they're all very detailed. Okay. What workers, volunteers, insurance, land. Yeah. What success will look like. They are all brilliant. Excellent. Thank you very much. Well, here are a few that I actually pulled together, and I think you named them, most of them, in the chat. So here are some typical elements of a simple plan. First of all, the need for the project and what it's trying to achieve. The activities, yeah, and there's timetable in the chat as well. And so what will success look like? That is the need for the project and what it's trying to achieve, absolutely. Then activities, communication, resources, people, rules and regulations, risk, timelines, all these things, and of course, money. So it is important to have a plan, a roadmap really, because without a plan, an idea just remains a dream. And you can use Zoom whiteboard or Google Jamboard or maybe a Miro online whiteboard to do a simple virtual post-it note session with your team. And make sure that your plan is detailed and realistic and can be put into action. Once you have your plan for your activity in place, you will be able to answer the question relating to funding in question number 2 of your project pitch that I mentioned earlier. So your answer here should be a bit broad and more general, something like funding will be spent on delivering a local community plant growing project with, for example, 3 flower beds and 2 vegetable patches involving residents of all ages. This is something like that you would put into question number 2. What's the goal of the project? How will the funding be spent? And what is its expected impact? So after you have mapped out the different elements of your plan and you have got a plan, it's time to decide which tools you will use for budgeting purposes. The easiest is to start with a list using a good old pen and paper and a rubber. There are many different ways in which you can capture or write lists. A mind map, a doodle, but also some of you have typed already some of the items into the chat function. So that is also a tool that you used. A very popular way of pulling a list together is, of course, a spreadsheet. It allows us to use formulas to calculate amounts, and we can use different digital applications for this. For example, we can use Google Spreadsheets that can be created for free in Google Sheets or in LibreOffice, or in paid-for applications via Microsoft Excel. And you can store your files in cloud services such as Google Drive, Dropbox, and OneDrive. And you can collaborate on them in real time too. And that's something that a lot of us have obviously learned and are now appreciating since the start of the pandemic. And it looks like that collaborating in a virtual form is staying for us yet a bit longer. So you can use templates or start from scratch, or you could also look around for some cloud-based budgeting. And don't forget that your mobile phones that I have here have a calculator function, and that you can also use your calculators, and also you have calculator functions on most desktops. So use those as well. But it's important that you choose simple tools that are suitable for remote collaboration and for working in virtual teams, as this is, as I said, very likely for us to stay for much longer. And you might also think about upskilling some of your volunteers or some of your group who do not have those digital skills, because the digital collaboration tools are really fun and enjoyable when they're visual, interactive, and easily shareable, but when people don't feel frustrated with them. And you can really feel truly connected. So what does a spreadsheet need to look like to be a budget? This particular screenshot is one of a Google Sheet that shows actually a team collaborating on it. And that's the kind of purple blue circle on the right hand side in the top corner of the sheet. Your budget will always need to show money coming in and money coming out, or income and expenditure. So let's look together at the typical cost categories that you could have as part of your budget. So again, can you maybe share a few kind of cost categories, please, in this chat? It'd be quite nice if you could. The experts in the room can also join in the chat if you could use, that would be brilliant. Okay, so capital costs, yes, which is a group of costs. I will explain that very shortly. Any other ideas? Money going out, what do we need to spend on project manager, equipment, rent, revenues, maybe money coming in, resources, material costs, publicity, brilliant. We always need promotion, publicity, volunteer expenses, any staff, if we have a proper organization, training, don't forget the digital skills training and other training, health and safety and all these things. Brilliant. Okay, so as you can see, there is a few on the spreadsheet on this example, but typical costs are generally venue hire, refreshments, publicity, and that's off and online, mobile phone costs, equipment that could be purchased or hire, websites and social media costs, promotion and marketing, transport, insurance, safeguarding, training, but also digital training, maybe first aid kits, sessional worker fees, etc., etc. So thank you for sharing. And don't forget to allow for contingency as well as part of your budget. It's really, really important. And you can also include that and show that to the funder. They will appreciate this, as this shows that you're planning for unforeseen costs and eventualities as well. And a quick word about the different groups of costs. And they've been mentioned. One was kind of capital cost in the chat. So for example, a nice shed or perhaps a recycled container and power tools in our example would be considered as capital costs. These are one-off purchases of greater value. And running or revenue costs that were also touched on in the chat are recurring costs arising from running your group or your organization. For example, insurance, back office costs like a Zoom license or wages, for example. And even to go a little bit deeper, there are also direct costs, which are kind of basically costs that are directly linked to your activity. But for now, don't get too sucked into the nitty-gritty. Just make sure that you get a volunteer on board that is skilled in accountancy. I would recommend that. On Action Funder, actually, you won't be asked to show your income, but you might want to think about the different types of income, so the money coming in as part of your sustainable income strategy. Because if you're applying to other funders, you will most likely need to detail your income and show that your actual income covers at least your costs. So now let's think about the different types of costs and categories. Now the different types and costs or categories don't really tell us yet how much they need to amount to or who is going to supply these. This is why our next step in budgeting is researching our costs. So a quick recap so far to see if you're still with me. So far, we have had a vision and we have planned our first activity and we have decided on our budgeting tools. We're using a Google spreadsheet and we roughly know what cost categories we're going to have and how much these amount to. Now it's time to do some researching and shopping around and some price comparison for the items and services we will need to craft the perfect budget. Let's start again small with budgeting for our first activity. So, as we said, our first activity is growing some plants and vegetables. And can you see, it's only now that we are really zooming into the detail to write a detailed list of all the items and services we might need for this. In order to grow some plants, we need compost, seeds, containers, tools, people, all the things that you also listed right at the beginning when we were thinking about our project plan. And depending on the ambition of our goal, we will need to think about quantities next, of course. So let's stick with compost for now. Now, how many bags of compost do we need and how much is each bag? So we really need to do some research around the prices for compost. And let's assume we worked out we need about 2,500 liters of compost for the area that we have earmarked to start with. So the next question that we need to ask ourselves is, where are we getting the compost from? As you're doing your research, you can do research by physically going around the garden centers, noting down the make and type and price of the compost. Or you can, of course, do some shopping online. And it's an idea to write down and capture the type of compost and suppliers on a spreadsheet so that you can compare like for like to make an informed decision. You can also do your research at your desk, of course, looking at catalogs, printed or online, or by browsing the internet. So soon you will discover that you'll find yourself adding different prices up. That's where you need your calculator. And the calculator will really become your best new friend. So comparing multi-purpose compost could look something like this. On Amazon, Miracle Grow comes in a lot of 2 bags. We know that we need 2,500 liters and the bags come at 30 liters per bag. So we basically need 32 bags at £15.75, and we're adding this up with our calculator. That amounts to £504. But you will also probably throw your arms up in horror now and shout, how much is that going to cost us? Because you might, when you start adding things up, really be surprised how much things cost. And you will ask yourself, now, does it need to be the cheapest compost or the best compost that money can buy? That is why we research further to see if there is better value for money. And we find out that we can actually order bulk bags of compost. So by doing a bit of online research, we have actually found that we can order bulk bags that come at a price of £88 per bag that contains 900 liters of compost. And we work out that we need 3 of those bags for £264. Now, can you see how much you saved yourself? You nearly half the amount that the compost was going to cost you just by doing some research. And that's a whopping of £240 that you saved. So that's why the planning stage is so important before you are researching your costs, because there's a real danger to get lost in the small details early on in the process and wasting time and energy at researching costs that are not relevant to your project aims. So researching your costs has another massive advantage. On your sheet, you can safely work out your most ambitious budget without spending real money and risking to run out of it before you have actually put a spade in the ground. So now let's pull our compost costs into our Google Sheet, and you can see it here with £264. I have put that already in the budget and I have circled that for you with the blue line. In the case of our compost costs, the planned and actual costs are exactly the same, few, and it's quite nice to have a kind of planned and actual column as well on your budget. So budgeting also helps you to think about saving some cash by applying my favorite, fastest funding tool, the 3B rule, which stands for beg, borrow, or barter. Because when applying the 3B rule, you basically get your red pen out and go over your detailed budget with it. You will use the red pen to cross out all the luxuries. And I'm afraid also all the nice to have items. Because you need to think, can I borrow? Can I beg? Or can I barter instead of raising hard cash for those items, those tools, or those skills? The red pen and the 3B rule, beg, borrow, barter, are your fastest and most important funding tool, along with your calculator, in my opinion. And a little tip from me, compost, by the way, is a byproduct when British Sugar is producing sugar. So perhaps they would be happy to donate some for free to you and your project. It's worth asking. Once you work your way through your spreadsheet and thought carefully about your costs, apply the 3B rule, you will come automatically to the final stage of budgeting. And this is finalizing your budget. You often finalize your budget for a particular activity, project, or month or year, and for a particular deadline, such as the funding application deadline. It's work in progress until you're satisfied that everything has been captured and all the costs have been researched and are balancing out. Check again and again that your numbers stack up and make sense. This last but very important step in finalizing your budget is really important, so don't skip it, please. You will know when your budget is right. It's right when it tells you stories in numbers, beautifully and accurately. And here is where you will add your budget on Action Funder once it's finalized. List the items and services or staff time that the funding will go to. Make sure you include quantities. Make sure you include the cost per unit, and make sure that the costs in your budget contribute to the project you have described. We want to make sure that nothing feels like an afterthought, and make sure that you check back your application form to see that the numbers stack up. And if you have put numbers in question number 2 that we discussed earlier, please make sure that you find your budget breakdown, that the costs and your budget breakdown shows are stacking up with the numbers that you mentioned earlier under question number 2. Before finishing, and it's 1 o'clock, let me share with you a bit of last minute wisdom. Cash is hard to come by and funding is fiercely competitive. This is why it's important to condense your budget and make it realistic and relevant to your goal or aim. You will need to have a succinct budget to apply for funding on Action Funder or to other funders indeed. Finally, 3 more good reasons for having a budget if you still need more convincing from me. It tells your story in money terms and show funders that you mean business and that you have thought your project through. This builds trust through numbers. A budget helps you to stay accountable to the funder and to your supporters and community. It's specific, transparent, and clear. And finally, a budget will keep your project on track, rein your spending in, and also demonstrate what amazing things you can realize on a shoestring when everybody pulls together. So hopefully you know a little bit more about budgeting now. If you still need a little bit more help, you can also look on the Action Funder guides, which I've taken a screenshot of. And now I'm going to hand over to Perrine and say thank you for listening, as we have got a little bit of time for some Q&As.
Thank you, Corinna. Thank you very much. That was really good. I hope you now feel empowered to create your own budget and, apply for funding on Action Funder. We'll be sending a follow-up email in the next few days with best ways to contact Corinna, the slides from the presentation, the recording, a short survey, and any information coming up on our next workshop in 2022. So thank you very much, everyone, for coming. If you have any questions, please do stick around for a few minutes. Otherwise, have a really nice lunch. And we're just going to kick off the questions actually with a question from Barbara, who was asking, Do many funds allow for contingency costs to be included as a line item? That's a really good one, actually, Corinna.
That is a very good one. So let's go back to our example of our small example of growing some plants and vegetables. So let's all think together, what could be contingency? It could be maybe that we need some extra plants. It could be maybe that we decided to maybe add another bed, vegetable bed or flower bed, and we actually need more compost. It could also be that we have maybe underestimated some training or maybe some kind of health and risk associated costs. So that could be contingency. Contingency really is for something should something go wrong or something that you've forgotten potentially. So if you think along those lines, then I have hopefully given you a few examples.
Yes, I hope, Barbara, that answers your question. Just going to take one from Jacques quickly on Action Funder. So Jacques, yes, you can absolutely have multiple applications. So if you are running several projects, you can have one application for your Tuesday night French lessons, and you can have a project for a class that you're hosting on the Sunday. Anything that you require funding for can be a separate application on Action Funder. Do we have any other questions in the room? It looks like it's all we have. Oh, actually, one question from Esther. When cutting out luxuries, are funders looking for a bare bones project or something nice?
That's a very good question. And the hint for that would normally be in the details the funder would publicize in a bit in the funding criteria, whether they are looking for very ambitious projects. So if they're using words like ambitious, then that might be an indication for a really padded out kind of nicer project. But generally, funders or funding is generally other people's money. So funders generally want to see that your project is making the biggest difference to the most people ever. So you have to take a bit of clues from what the funder is looking for by doing maybe a bit of research around the funder as well. But generally speaking, they want to make sure that you're spending their money very, very wisely.
I'm just going to add something to this just because we have seen a few applications on Action Funder in the budget breakdown, things such as refreshments, and the projects have been funded. So I think it's really, if this is like a minor cost in your project, on a project that makes a big difference, it's fine to have them there, as long as it's, I think, kind of not your main cost, of course. All right, I think we are 1 minute late, so we are going to leave the session here. But if you have any questions, we'll send all the details that you need to contact either Action Funder or Corinna in the email. And on that note, have a lovely day and a lovely lunch.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Bye. Lovely to see you all.